Super excited to have you join us again. I am the National Director for the WineStyles family of stores, as many of you know. It seems like it's been some time since we've done one of these, but we obviously do them every single month. A couple things before we jump in and I introduce our special guest, and more importantly, you start to taste their amazing wines and hear about their wonderful story. As always, make sure all of your stores, if you are at one of the stores or if you're participating from home, that you have your volume on mute. That will enable us to hear our guests. If you have questions, please write them, type them in the chat function. I will do my best to monitor that, jump in, and certainly share the questions you have, even if they're just observations about how amazing the wines are, flavor profiles, or just things you want to share that is relevant to the conversation. Please do that. We always welcome your input as we go through that. A couple additional items of note. Obviously, all of the stores that are participating here with us have the wines in stock ready to sell. So definitely buy your favorites. Many of these that we're featuring are not always, or actually quite honestly, some of them are very rarely available in all of our markets, let alone some of the markets that we have. So what we have will be very limited. If we do happen to sell out in the markets, the relationship that we have with Chris and Laura at Old Bridge Cellars, I know they'll find a way to make it happen if we definitely find some more. So with no further ado, we have two special guests with us here today. We have Laura Abbott. Laura is with Old Bridge Cellars. She's there waving at us. We have been long time partners with Old Bridge Cellars. I went back and was looking at wine club lists, winery spotlight lists, and I think we've probably done more wine clubs and winery spotlights with them than virtually any other supplier partner, largely because they have amazing wines like we're going to taste today. So welcome, Laura. I'm sure she'll have some observations to jump in and share some questions as well. And then we have Elton Slone. Elton is the president, CEO, and I believe now also managing member of Robert Craig Winery. He has been, I believe, vital in sort of the revitalization of the brand, bringing it back to where it is, and certainly bringing it to the forefront of Napa Valley Cab. He shared earlier that they're a cab house, but certainly their Chardonnay is nothing to be scoffed at. So I believe we're going to jump right in. Welcome, Elton. We're excited to taste the wines, and we're off and running, right?
Yes, we are indeed. Thanks so much, Jeff. What can I tell you but that it's a tremendous pleasure to be here. Gosh, I see all these stores on, and I'm just amazed that we're doing this around the country. We do a bi-monthly webinar at Robert Craig with a special guest, and when I took a few months off, I can't believe how my inbox filled up with angry emails on people wanting more virtual tasting so they can enjoy Napa Valley at home. So welcome everyone, and what can I tell you? It's such a pleasure for me to see all these folks from everywhere from Iowa to Chicago on down at WineStyles. I certainly would be skinnier and a lot wealthy if it weren't for WineStyles tasting stations across the United States. It seems like they're always in a good spot next to some Tony shops in the mall. In any event, we're going to have some very special wines tonight. I was amazed that the lineup is going to be featuring predominantly our Howell Mountain produce, which is what we're known for the very most. And some of these wines are extremely hard to come by. Now, for those of you that don't know why or have never had Robert Craig, Bob Craig was the original, one of the OG squad, as we say, of mountain Cabernet Sauvignon growers and farmers in all of the Napa Valley. If you think about, who was in that first class, it's really Randy Dunn on Howell Mountain, which is the first nested AVA or American viticultural area within the Napa Valley. And then you have probably Bob Travers and Noni Travers at Mayacamas Winery on Mount Veeder, and then the Bronsteins at Diamond Creek. And then you have Robert Craig, who, though our winery's on the summit of Howell Mountain, he founded the Mount Veeder AVA at his time with the Hess Collection and Donald Hess when he planted all of those vineyards in the late 70s and early 80s and ran that business until he decided he wanted to go out on his own and just pursue small lot winemaking, which after his death, that is my mission and our company's mission today. And then he also founded the Spring Mountain AVA. So we're not going to have either of those wines tonight, but both of those from us are beautiful. But I think if I had one wine to take to somebody, or one child to save ahead of the rest, it would be Howell Mountain Cabernet, if I had to pull one from the raging waters above all the other wines that we produce. So I was Bob's business partner for many years. I've been with the winery almost 20 years. And then Bob retired in 2012 and unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But if anybody was lucky enough to meet him, he's one of the great guys in all of the Napa Valley in the history, just one of the nicest gentlemen, he and his wife, and a true farming savant. So we're going to have, I mean, the big difference is tonight, we're, you know, if you think of these great wineries that are on the valley floor, that many are, you know, super popular, whether it's, you know, Camus or Duckhorn or Silver Oak or Cakebread or Schaefer. I mean, these are tremendous properties, but, you know, the wine production is in every single case over 200,000 cases. And, you know, the Chardonnay that you're going to start with and go ahead and crack into that, for instance, is about 250 cases. The Merlot is about 200 cases. The Zinfandel is 200 cases. All of these wines are extremely small production, and they're really about just speaking of these individual places. So I'm going to pop into share screen now, and I'm going to take you all on a little visual tour that we start. I want you to get that Howell Mountain vibe. First things first, hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. I want to just raise a little toast to all of us here having some wine on a beautiful Wednesday evening in the Napa Valley. We just brought in the final fruit in the last couple of days. And so the fermentations are going and the champagne is flowing up at Robert Craig. So cheers, everybody. All right, if any questions, put them in the chat, and then I'll periodically ask Jeff for anything, because I'm not going to be able to watch the chat that much. Right here we are on the summit of Howell Mountain in Northeast Napa Valley. This is us looking straight out. Just to the left across the valley is Mount Veeder. Straight in the middle is Spring Mountain, and then to your right across the valley is Diamond Mountain. And then just to our immediate left is Outpost Winery. To our right is Larry Turley's place and Black Sears. So this is the very summit where I would say, I always say we're the highest vineyard and winery in all of the Napa Valley. If Larry Turley isn't immediately next to me in a tasting, because he doesn't have a winery, but his vineyard's about 50 feet higher than ours. So here you are looking back the other direction. Now you're looking out over Pope Valley and Lake County, and you can see, you know, Mount Konocti all the way back there in the distance and just north in Lake County. And it's just obscured from the smoke of all those methamphetamine pipes going at the same time up there in Lake County. But it's an absolutely beautiful place to grow grapes. And that little vineyard you can see just to the left-hand side, to the far left on the screen, that is Black Sears Vineyard, where we're going to be enjoying our Zinfandel. So before we hit Chardonnay, I just want to get you a vibe for the winery. If you're ever lucky enough to score a ticket up there, this is what it looks like coming up the lane. Our little winery, our winemaker, this is Jason Price, who's been with us for many years, is head winemaker, and then Keith Emerson has been the director of winemaking for Vineyard 29, a very famous Napa property, for almost 20 years as well. And he's been with us since 2005 and has really helped direct us back into the highest quality wines that are produced anywhere in the Napa Valley. You can see, I mean, this is at bud break. You can see that it snows up there on Howell Mountain rather frequently, which is amazing considering where we are. And then here's a shot of me and my lovely wife, Shelley, with Bob Craig and Lynn Craig just a few years ago before Bob passed. But these are the founders of the winery, just the most lovely people. So right now what's going on is we're just pressing off tanks, which means we're taking wine off the gross lees in the tanks. And we always give them a little breath of air and before we put them into barrel, just to take any sort of stink off, just to give them a little, you know, it's like anything else. They just like to breathe a little bit when they get off the skins. But you can see what kind of year 2022 is going to be. This is our Merlot in 2022, and it is the color of my soul. I mean, that thing is absolutely dark black. So here's a little map of where we're going to go with the Cabernets. You can see all the way down, these red dots are vineyards. And so the red dot in sort of the lower right, lower mid right, Affinity Lalande Vineyard, that's where we're going to start with Cabernets. And then we are going to go from there straight up to Howell Mountain, all the way on the far upper right. So all the rest of the red wines are going to come from there. But if you can see down at the bottom where it says Los Carneros, there's not a red dot, but if you were to go left or west from there, about 20 miles from where it says Los Carneros, where you get into Sonoma, that's where this Chardonnay is grown. So here's a perfect bunch of Chardonnay from Gap's Crown. You can see this is middle of August, and even at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's completely covered in fog. Napa Valley does not have a lot of tremendous Chardonnay terroir. The problem with Napas in general, it's too warm. And I like Chardonnay that's really racy, super lean. This is a wine that just hurts your face to drink when it's young, but it's going to age for many years in the cellar. So if you really don't like California Chardonnay in general, this wine might be for you. So here's another shot of that beautiful vineyard with those old vines. And we'll talk about the Chardonnay for just a second. There we go. But so hopefully you're all enjoying a taste of the Chardonnay. I don't have the bottles with me, but I do have a glass here. I took samples with me from the office when I was there. And this is a wine that, though we're famous for Cabernet, it's quietly one of the great whites, the most ageable whites produced in California every year. And again, we make a very, very small amount of this wine. It's not cheap, but anytime the press tastes it, they say, wow, this is very inexpensive for what it is. So Gap's Crown, Sonoma Coast, it's the one wine we'll have from Sonoma, and just an amazing amount of acidity because it's cooler there. You get that necessary acid for the grapes. It's not technically a mountain Chardonnay, but it is at 900 feet of elevation. It sits in a fog pocket up there. So in downtown Napa, when we're all sitting in shorts and short sleeve shirts, you go over to Gap's Crown Vineyard and you need a down vest and some wool socks on, even in the middle of summer. It's very cool, but it gives this wine this brightness, this tension. It has a mineral component, which is very rare for white wines. And I don't know if anybody has the bottle around, you can look at the back label. There's a joke on there because I love Tamales Bay oysters. I put on the only thing that's on the back label, it just says a portion of your purchase will go to the Tamales Bay Oyster Overpopulation Concerned Citizens Alliance. And that's a total joke, but it's made for crushing Tamales Bay oysters. But I always have people that come and thank me so much for my charitable giving, which I find to be a riot. So yeah, that is our first wine. Hopefully everybody's had the Chardonnay before we move to reds. Do I have any questions from anyone on the Chardonnay or any comments?
I don't have any on the comments, but one question you talked about is this is sort of this isn't your typical California cab, right? And I guess the question becomes, you know, with the approach of California becoming bigger and bolder with a little bit with everything, especially with Chardonnays and big, buttery, oaky, malolactic bombs, what is, I mean, obviously to maintain the acidity that you talk about in a hotter climate, even though it is Sonoma, how do you go about the production and what is sort of that malolactic and oak regime to keep that balance that is in this wine?
Well, those are excellent questions, Jeff. What I, prefer to do, we might end up running this wine through malolactic in the future, just because it makes a more stable, wine. And then I can go unfiltered. That's the big no-no. You don't do unfiltered and non-mallow at the same time, so you don't accidentally make sparkling wine. But I think really, the production process is very similar to white Burgundy. The acid numbers, to give you an idea, if anybody's a complete geek out there, in general, pH as an inverse relationship to acidity. The lower the pH, the higher the acid in a wine. And that is the major preservative in great white Burgundy or tremendous California Chardonnay, such as Marcassin or Seritas or Mayacamas or Chateau Montelena or Hansel. They all share this spectacular acidity. And most California Chardonnays are approaching our Cabernet level of acidity in the 3.7 range. Most California Cabernets are about 4.0. There's a world of difference between those two values. Now in Burgundy, those values are like 3.35 is Ravenot Chablis, which is from the coldest part of Burgundy, of France. And that is an extremely low pH value, meaning very high acid. The Chardonnay, I believe it's 2021 that you're having right now, that is a 3.2 pH, so even lower than Ravenot Chablis. Just to give you an idea, that is a savage amount of acidity for a California Chardonnay. And even then, I don't run it through malolactic fermentation, which will change that malic acid, which is a citrus-like acid, into a lactic acid, which is more like you would find in dairy products like milk or cheese, which is where you get that sort of theater popcorn butter if you don't have enough acidity to run it through that fermentation. So I use very heavy pressure at the press to start, which inoculates the wine later on from oxygen contamination. Give it oxygen early, and it really, it's kind of like a vaccine against oxidation later on for the wine. And then just a few months in some brand new French oak barrels, some barrels that are very difficult to come by, that are used typically in white Burgundy. We use Ramon barrels that are expensive and hard to obtain, but you hardly get any oak. The wine is so wound up right now that, I mean, it's going to outlive me in the cellar. So that's generally, Jeff and company, what the intent is behind this wine. When I first advocated for this style, we first started making a Gaps Crown Chardonnay after going through Bill Price's other vineyard, Durrell. I think our first vintage was 2013 with Gaps Crown, because the Durrell vineyard to me just wanted to be too Californian, too typical, and too fat to use. And it's a fine vineyard. Many people make nice Chardonnay, but Gaps Crown is really a special vineyard. It's been most famous for Pinot Noir production from Costa Brown, which was owned by the same guy, Bill Price, who founded Texas Pacific Company and has the controlling interest in Kistler and his own winery called Three Sticks, but a great guy and a spectacular vineyard. So if there are no more questions, we'll move to some red wine.
Yep, I think we're ready for the next one.
All right, away we go. All right, gang. So now we go to our Lalande vineyard, which is, like I said before on the map, it's down in an area called Coombsville. And I've never taken the AVA in case we have a year like when we replant it this coming year, we're going to have to use other fruit from around it, from Howell Mountain, but it is through 2022. It is all estate in this, what used to be Bob Craig's front yard, this beautiful vineyard. And I put the definition right on the front label of the wine in gold because people kept saying, why do you call it Infinity? And it's like, egad, I'll kill you. But Affinity, the perfect union of components, sharing a special origin. This, you can see from the vineyard shot that this is not valley floor. This is hillside. It's our lowest elevation Cabernet that we produce. But it's the reason we call it Affinity is it's all 5 of the Bordeaux 5 grapes grooving together. So we label it as Cabernet Sauvignon. 75% is as low as you can go and still label it Cabernet. And I think we're constantly butting right up against that number. But it has Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec in the wine as well. And those other varieties take that stiff Cabernet and they really help it to come alive, to unlock it and give it this beautiful perfume. So this is a very high acid wine. The Chardonnay is a terrific indicator of what's to come with the red wines, because unlike most California Cabernets, These are not ripe, sweet. We don't leave any residual sugar. These are not filtered. These are not, micro oxygenized. There's never a titrator truck in our driveway. We don't get it ripe and water back. These wines are what the vineyard intends. So they're very old school winemaking in a very modern way. So old school, I would say, wine style in a very modern way with the winemaking. So here we have Affinity, which is half of our production in the company and goes to at about 3,500 cases. And this wine goes about 90% to restaurants, but it's one of the great red wine buys in all of America every year. Here's a shot where you can see these old vines on the property, really beautiful. These were planted in the late 70s by John Caldwell, so they're over 40 years old. Average vine age in Napa now is about 5.5 years. The valley is going through a humongous replanting. Now that everybody's up to speed on red blotch and trunk diseases from making large cuts in pruning, which was typical. So California vines, a lot of vines in Bordeaux and first growth houses have a lifespan of about 80 years. And most California vines have had a lifespan of about 25 years. So these old vines really give you a sense of that property. It's on 5C rootstock, which is a total pain in the ass to manage. You can see it's super rocky soil, and I wish it was on 110R, like our Howell Mountain and Mount Veeder properties are on, but it really just gives you this sense of what is there. So this was obviously a shot from early springtime or winter, maybe late February when this was pruned, which is a great time to come to the Napa Valley if you've never been there. But you can see how old these vines are, and the fact that these are not cordon prune vines that go out into a Y. You'll see with every vineyard, we cane prune at Robert Craig, which means we take canes and we're giving every vine its ability to choose how much fruit it's going to carry. And so that's a very expensive way to farm. If you're farming on the valley floor, you're paying about $10,000 an acre to do it. Affinity for us is about $13,000 to $14,000 an acre. And the mountain wines are at $27,000 an acre because everything has to be hand done. So very difficult to farm this way. There's another good shot of Affinity. And then Antonio Galloni, I always say, hey, Antonio, he says, so this is your entry-level Cabernet at Venice Media. And I'm like, no, this isn't our entry-level Cabernet. It's less expensive to farm than the mountains, and we sell it all to restaurants. So we've always kept the price down. And then he always says, every year it's like 93 points. And he says a terrific entry-level wine in this range, but it just drives me out of my mind because this has all of the capability and the finesse and the beauty of our 97-point Howell Mountain Cabernet. But it just never gets respect because the price is there at $75 retail or so. I don't know where you guys are tonight, but somewhere around there, I would wager. Yeah, so next, I'll do stop share. Any questions about Affinity? I mean, I think this wine just has so much perfume. I make it differently than we produce the Howell Mountain and Mount Veeder. It's a little less time in new oak, usually about 65 to 70%, so we can preserve that beautiful fruit, but it has that acidity. If this were a Bordeaux, this wine would be our Chateau Margaux, whereas the Veeder is like Saint-Julien, and then the Howell is all about the structure. That's like Saint-Estèphe. So if any of you guys are super geeky, that's where we are. But this is a wine that you might like this the best, even though it might be our least expensive Cabernet that you're going to have while we taste today.
Question I have, obviously you showed the tasting notes for the 2018. I know 2018 for you guys for this wine was through the roof, right? What kind of factors are at play when you're talking about a good versus a great vintage, great year?
Terrific question, Jeff. More interesting question. And it's 18 was considered a very fine vintage across Napa Valley, except for the Northeast where Howell Mountain is located and where, a whole lot of very high-end vineyards, everybody from Isley to 100 acre, et cetera, had a smoke problem in 18. So we were only able to harvest a very small amount of super clean fruit for Howell Mountain. So we ended up making great wine. and 18 south in the valley was really great, whereas 17 in the Napa Valley was a difficult vintage south, and Howell Mountain was absolutely a phenomenal vintage in 17. So I would say beware generalizations in terms of what the vintage is, because 2011 is another classic example. We made great wine, and they scored very well in 2011, which was a rainy, cold vintage that was panned resoundingly about the Napa Valley. And in the mountains, as Antonio Galoni noted from Venice, he goes, wow, I felt like I was in a different world on Pritchard Hill and Howell Mountain, where I'd leave rainy St. Helena and go up above the cloud line. And it was like this incredible, beautiful Indian summer that we were having in that year. So in 18, though, what we got was like we received in 21, 18 was this just absolutely gorgeous year where you didn't have too many highs, you didn't have too many lows. On the valley floor, it was a very abundant vintage. It was 30% above normal yields on the valley floor, whereas on Howell Mountain and Mount Veeder, we were only up by 5% because we got frost and then we got wind right at bud break, very similar to 2022, similar to this year's crop. So 18 was just very smooth, unremarkable, good set, except for frost and wind at that flower and fruit set. It was a terrific year. So high color, small berries, a lot of intensity, and just beautiful, beautiful tannins. And so this wine to me has a tremendous amount of tannin in it. It's, most Napa Cabernets test out somewhere, if you're measuring them, in the, 1200, 1250, 1280 parts per million tannin. Chateau Lafite is around 1325, almost always. This wine is 1400 to 1450, which is huge. And then our Howell Mountain will be in the 1600s. But the tannins are very ripe and very round. So it's because of low yields, we're able to get that integration in the wines. And so that all comes from farming and not from winemaking. Why, I'm telling you, that is, whoever's producing that wine is a genius. Any questions from any of the peanut gallery on the wines, or any comments?
Nothing yet. They usually spark their interest after wine 3 when they get a little bit liquored up.
All right.
Let's hope.
I'm sorry for the geek talk. No question is, believe me, no question is too simple. The more I've done this, I think about, I came to California to work for from Indiana, where I worked for Robert Mondavi Winery, and before that with the distributor. So he said, we like geek talk. Right on, Steve Gibson. But I think I moved out. I went to school at Indiana University and got into wine waiting tables, and then worked for a distributor that sent me around the world. And I think I worked for Robert Mondavi as a Midwest manager after that, and then to California to manage a small Sonoma family's brand in the mid 90s. And I got here with, I think, $5,000 in the checking account, and I've parlayed that now to 21 million bucks in debt. So I've had this meteoric rise in the wine business. It's incredible. So now as a winery owner, I mean, the more you learn about this stuff, the more you realize you don't know anything. So the first tell on somebody that says, yeah, I know a lot about wine, that's usually a sign that they know nothing. But it's travel along with me now. We're going to go from Affinity, which I think this wine is showing beautifully. We're going to go to our Howell Mountain wines. And the first master sommelier in the United States out of New Orleans said on his list of 10 wines you have to have before you die, right in between Domaine de Romanoconti, La Tâche, and Chateau Aubryon sits Robert Craig Howell Mountain Cabernet. So we're going to have that. We're going to start with a little Howell Mountain Cuvée. So let me take you to Howell Mountain now. This is a beautiful shot from the low block of our vineyard in 2020, about 2 weeks before the fires hit. And then here's a shot of, I think this was 2 or 3 days after I was allowed up there in the fires from the same viewpoint. So you can see we just got fried This is my pity party where you guys, I need to go from just buying 6 bottles to taking a case to keep Robert Craig solvent. So now we're up on Howell Mountain, and as you go, what makes mountain wine great, as you go up in elevation, you go down in water holding capacity in the soil, you get smaller yields, it's more expensive to farm. So you get these berries that are so small, and I'll show you a couple bunches of fruit, one from Howell Mountain, one from another property later, but you get this extremely high, what's called skin to juice ratio, and all the flavor in the grape is contained in that area between the skins and the juice. And the reason you don't want rain around harvest time is the vines will suck up that water. It'll appear in the berries and make the wines dilute. Howell Mountain wines are anything but diluted. And I think it's the first what's called nested AVA out of 14 in the Napa Valley that was founded in 1983 by Randy Dunn, by the Brakesmans, the Lamborns. It was a group of guys that said, this is above the inversion layer. So this is the only appellation in the Napa Valley that has a elevation requirement. You have to be at 1,400 feet in order to call your wine Howell Mountain. So you have some of the best wines in Napa Valley just down below that line that can't put Howell Mountain on the label, whether it's Rick Foreman or Viader or 100 Acre, Jason Woodbridge's wine. Howell Mountain is very special, and it's because you get this long ripening curve, much cooler up there, about 12 degrees cooler than the valley floor. And you can see what the subsoil is. When you look at this photo of our vineyard, this is just a photo that I took with my iPhone at sunset in the fall. You just get this, it's just a rock garden. I mean, our place is growing on solid rock. And so you get cooler nights, or cooler days, slightly warmer nights. So even though you have this high skin to juice ratio and these huge tannins, these tannins are very round and resolved because it stays a little warmer at night, and you get this non-photosynthetic maturation of the skins and the seeds and the tannins. And so you get these tannins that are what's called long chain tannin in the wine that are very juicy and round in your mouth. So as you're having these wines tonight, remember, 1,600 ppm, that's humongous tannin count. However, the tannins are absolutely gorgeous and integrated into the wine. So as Bob Craig always said, wines are like people. If you're ugly when you're young, you're in big trouble when you're older. So this is a shot of our Affinity, Affinity Estate Cabernet, or not, excuse me, Howell Mountain Estate Cabernet. This is the soil on the winery vineyard. We have 2 vineyards. I'll show you both because this Cuvée is made predominantly from the young vines in one vineyard. Here's a regular bunch of fruit that I took this year from down on valley floor just below us. And then these are what Howell Mountain bunches look like. So the bank is always like, Elton, is there some sort of fertilizer that you can put on those vines? I'm like, you just don't get it, man. You're not pure. But at any rate, this is the Howell Mountain Estate Vineyard. You can see the vines back behind these rocks. I mean, that's as you keep going toward the back of the picture, there's outpost butts into our vineyard right there, another tremendous property, very famous. But there is no substitute. There are other wineries on Howell Mountain that are kind of down in the woods and deeper soil. Our place being on the summit, it is just a rock garden, and it gives these wines just a savage expression of this terroir. Here's a great example of what goes on this time of year. This is a shot taken in early October, which is incidentally a great time to come to the Napa Valley and visit when all the kids have to go back to school and the hotel rates go down. But you can see that it is above that fog layer. The Howell Mountain AVA starts at 1,400 feet, but we are at like I said, at almost 2,400 feet up there. Or a great shot. So the wine that we're having now, our Howell Mountain Cuvée, this is a wine that you should just buy by the case. I mean, Galoni gave this a 93 and a 92 point score in its first 2 years being produced, but it is well beyond that. I just said, hey, I want to make a wine that I don't have to, the fruit was way too valuable to sell. It's this Candlestick Ridge vineyard that we bought from Duckhorn, which is very close to our winery, but you can see how different the soil is. This is pure volcanic tufa. And so you can see we're replanting. We ripped this whole half of this vineyard, needed repaired when Duckhorn sold it, which is why the vineyard needed work. And then the private equity group that owned Duckhorn at the time, GI Partners, sold to another consumer facing private equity firm. And they needed the money and didn't want to invest anymore in the vineyard as it looked bad on the financials. So we were able to pick this one up, and it is one of the greatest vineyards, not just in the Napa Valley, but in the world. And as luck would have it, Alex Ryan, the CEO of Duckhorn, he planted both this vineyard and our winery estate vineyard. The pictures you were just looking at, he raised his kids in the little house on our property there. But we'll get to the Merlot later, but everything you hear is in the foreground. So all the vines you're having are in the foreground of this picture. So this is the Cuvée is I don't know if I can, unfortunately, I feel like I'm in some weird sci-fi movie showing this, but oh my gosh, I'm having this wine right now. And this is a $120 bottle of wine that simply is from younger vines and has less oak and is released a year earlier than our estate wine. So we're going to go big and have the estate Cabernet later on. But our first foray into Howell Mountain is the Cuvée. And this is just, what can I say? This is, we almost could label it as Cabernet, but it's right around 70% Cabernet Sauvignon, then 20% Merlot, a little Petit Verdot, and some Malbec rounded out. And the Petit Verdot and the Malbec give the wine its lushness and its perfume, but it's all single vineyard, it's all estate, it's all French oak, it's unfiltered, it's unfined. And the fruit was simply from these young vines was simply too valuable for me to sell off as bulk. So we produced a little wine and we started kind of a monster. Now people are grubbing after it. And I would say, if you have any money in the world, this is one just to go 12 bottles strong on, because it is one of the greatest red wines produced in California, and it's only $50 and not $300 a bottle. Any comments on the Cuvée?
Quick question. Obviously, this is a blend. Are you year to year, vintage to vintage, looking for a specific house style or flavor profile, or is it you're kind of taking what the vines give you in any given year?
More great questions. God, I need you to come on with me every time, Jeff. We are, it's a little bit of both. I mean, the house style is what this section of young vines, like where it's the one it's that block really that's kind of just above my head there, or where these come. You can see the terraces and then see those vines. And so it's the nature of, I mean, Candlestick is, I think the cheapest wine that Duckhorn made off there was $135 a bottle, and that was back before 2015. And it's an amazing property, and so it just gives us. And I don't want to mess with what it gives us. It gives this incredibly bold fruit, and the wine is so good that it's made me consider using less oak on the estate wines. But I think the estate wines need it to round them out somewhat. But oh my gosh, is this just a killer glass of wine? I mean, the Howell Mountain Cabernet and Merlot that we'll have, those are about 85% brand new French oak, and this wine sees about 30% new French oak. And so the blend every year is just going to be is just going to be what these vines give us, and it's going to fit in with our house style, because that's what the rest of the vineyard tastes like too. Even the old vines taste very similar to the young vines. So we'll make this wine for about 3 more years, and then it will start going into the estate juice or into the estate bottlings. But for the time being, oh my God, this bottle of wine is second to none. All right.
They just keep getting better. Now the Merlot's going to blow people's minds.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, to me, Howell Mountain's greatness you know, I think of the other side of Napa Valley on that Mayacamas range side, that was all pushed up by earthquake from the ocean floor. And so you get this fossilized marine material. The soil looks very much like you're suddenly transported to Champagne or to Chablis, where it's this real chalky white soil. It's all that fossilized marine material, and then it has some sandstone and some shale going through it. And on that side, you know, I always say like the Veeder and our Diamond Mountain, those are the Spring Mountain, those are the cello, these deep round bass notes, these really chewy tannins, this super black fruit. And over on this side, on the Vaca range, which was created at the same time 5 million years ago from the eruption of the Sierra Nevada mountains, which are just east of us. I mean, it was so violent that they threw these giant rocks, volcanic rocks over here, which formed Howell Mountain in this Vaca range. I say this side is the violin as opposed to the cello. This side is all about high nervous notes, a little more knees and elbows while they're young. These have these really exotic brambleberry, like thorny vine fruit quality to the wines, a little thorny underbrush. There's a little sweet herbaceous quality to them that I find like in great wines like Chapelet's Pritchard Hill Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon, and certainly over here, David Abreu's wines. They all have that great quality. The people that allow the vineyard to speak in the wine is absolutely necessary. So now we're going to Merlot, and if there are no thoughts on the Cuvée, I will just tell you that how great this wine is. It tastes really good now when it's young, but I guarantee you give this wine 10 years and take it to a party where everybody's pulling out cult Cabernets, and you just might take away the wine of the night with your 50-bucker here. It is quite the wine. But we'll go to Merlot next, and we make Merlot. I only make a little bit because I always have to remind myself, Elton, you're not in this to just enjoy the stuff that you make. You have to also stay in business. And so we do, gosh, maybe 180 cases of Merlot. I think Laura can tell you that it's a constant battle between Old Bridge Cellars and Robert Craig Winery. I promised them a lot of Merlot and then rescinded my promise because we ran out of it.
Exactly.
So Old Bridge Cellars is a great import company that represents, and sales and marketing company that represents Robert Craig. And I always agree to allocations and then run out. But I am a right bank Bordeaux. That's the right bank of the Gironde River, where you have on the left bank, you have all the, you know, the famous chateau from Bordeaux that most people think of, Latour, Lafite, you know, Aubryon, Margaux, etc. But on the right bank is, you know, that is where Chateau Le Pen and Petrus rule the day, and Angelus. You have these wines that are Merlot and Cabernet Franc based, and so Howell Mountain seems to be this place, one of the only places in Napa to grow this interesting Merlot. So I'm going to share screen again. I'll pop on, and you're going to have an extremely rare wine now. And of all things, in 2019, the Merlot for us was by the lab numbers, the highest color, highest tannin. It was the biggest wine that we made in the 19 vintage. And it was the Cabernet. Of course, we don't submit the Merlot to press because it's such a small production. But again, the Cabernet in that year is a 97 pointer from Galoni, but I think the Merlot is an even better wine. So let me take you to share. And the Merlot comes from these blocks that you can see right here, directly in front of you. They are the ones that are highest up on the hill and farthest from you. Those terraces right in front of you, those are where we grow the Malbec that really does well in these wines. So Merlot again is now, you're looking from the opposite way. So it's that block that is kind of the highest up, the closest to you on the right as you look at the screen. That's where the Merlot comes from for this wine. And it is just, what can I tell you? It just makes this absolutely savage monster wine, but it has that beautiful lushness and that forwardness that Merlot can give you when the wine is young. So This is one, our first vintage making an individual Merlot was 2013. And that's one that, you know, if my mom snuck up behind me and tried to get that glass out of my hand, she might get knocked down by accident, of course. But the Merlot is quite the wine. So I hope you're all enjoying that. I'm switching to Merlot here myself. Okay. Cheers. So the tannin level is even higher, if you can believe it, than what we have in the Cabernet, but the fruit is so profound that what you're getting is just this pure lushness in the wine. Here's a shot that really shows you how steep that section is. Let me tell you. So you can see there, that is the backside of Mount St. Helena. We're just sort of south and a little bit east of the summit of Mount St. Helena, which that is at just over 4,500 feet tall. A lot of people will tell you it's a, you know, it's a dormant volcano, but I even hear winemakers and winery owners say that, but really it's just a humongous volcanic rock from the force of that explosion that formed the Sierra Nevada mountain range to the east. At the same time, the Vaca range was formed. So you can see these vines. When Duckhorn owned this place, they would get about 130 tons off of the vineyard, and we currently get 66 tons. So you can see what's happened to the farming. I'm a guy, we farm this down to the nub, way less fruit coming off of these vines, and it just makes for, I mean, this, I can't even tell you how remote and how rare this vineyard is. Let me see if I have another shot. There's another good shot. So the Merlot blocks are the ones that go up the hill close to you in the picture. And there's one that you can't see that goes down to the left on the very low block. That's a super strong block 4 of Merlot from this property. Yeah, there's oh my gosh. But you can see there's nothing out there. This is so remote. And fortunately, it's all owned by the Napa Land Trust. So none of that will ever be developed. I'll show you in the next round when we do the Cabernet, some slides of the game camera will blow your mind on what kind of large mammals are out here. But this is one, I've always been a Chateau Petrus fan, an Angelus fan, a Via Chateau Certain fan. And this is one of those wines that just really hits me where I live. And I can see Tim has asked, is the Merlot 100%? No, I mean, none of our wines are 100%. I actually blended some young vine Cabernet into this wine. I think it's about 8% or so to soften the Merlot a little bit. So it has a little bit of Cabernet and maybe 1% of Malbec in it. But it is such a beautiful wine. Our wines in the cellar, if you can wait 5 to 6 years after vintage date, that's when they get their first big change. I think we're drinking 18s today. And so we're already 4 years in. You just need another year, maybe a year and a half. So you don't have to wait forever for them to get that first big change where it stops showing all the primary fruit. And you start to get that really unique perfume and that vineyard essence in these wines. And then these wines are all going to do, 40 years in the cellar. But peak drinking time to me on them is always about, 10 to 15 years after vintage date. The wines are showing wonderfully, and then they're going to hold forever. But if you're going to drink them young, I suggest a decanter. You just put this wine in. When my wife Shelley and I, when we have dinner, I'll put a water pitcher. Everybody uses a decanter that has dust or whatever or detergent in it. And so my suggestion is just use a water pitcher or a carafe or something that you use all the time, and just pour the wine straight up and down into that. And usually about an hour into cooking, all of a sudden the entire dining room will smell like, Howell Mountain wine. And that's when the wine has unlocked itself. But any questions on the Merlot? I don't want to keep you guys forever, but I want to make sure you get all the knowledge.
Arthur in Montclair had a quick question. So his question was explaining the tannin percentage and then the test for measuring tannins percentage as well.
Oh, explaining the tannin percentage?
Yep.
Well, the tannins are all about, they tend to really be about that skin to juice ratio in the grapes. Now, tannin can be picked up. It's that stuff that dries out the sides of your mouth, but along with acid, it's one of the primary structure elements for wine. And what you want those tannins that are called complex anthocyanins. You want the tannin molecule to have bonded with the color molecule, the protein molecule in the wine, create these long chain polymers where the tannins taste very juicy and round and fat in your mouth. And so then they're much less susceptible to oxygen and color decay. So the wines, again, that taste good in their youth, that are big and taste good, those are going to age much better than wines that have a real drying, sharp tannin, because those are tannins that have not bonded, and they are simply going to outlive the fruit in the wine. The wine is out of whack when it's young, if you get that. So we use a test from ETS labs. We can do some of that in-house. We have an abuleometer and other equipment that we can test for most stuff, but taking a tannin assay is something that we use a local lab for. And I'm not sure how I'm not sure exactly what that test is about. That's a good question, but if I figure that out, I'll let you know. I should probably know more about it, but we usually do a test that it's just basic. It's a basic ppm, and the values are on Napa Cabernets are anywhere from 1,000 usually to the low 1,300s. So our wines, it's like Dunn is similar to our level. Those guys have crazy tannin in their wines, and we're old school as well, but a little bit more, I would say, a little bit more polished stylistically. But so tannin is subjective. It's not a measure of anything except for the, berry size, the amount of juice relative to the skins will give you that. Now you pick up more and more tannin. What you don't want is in fermentation, if you go too hot or too long, you start picking up harsh tannins from the seeds than the sweet tannins from the skins. So that's something to watch. Also, counterintuitively, Bob Craig used to leave the wine, just say, God, this still tastes like it needs more time. So we'd leave it in barrel for another 6 months. And what would happen, it was pick up these hard barrel tannins. And so it's counterintuitive. If it tastes too tannic, get it the hell out of the barrel a lot of times, because the barrel is not doing anything. The barrel also has a harsher tannin profile. So to me, it's about having enough fruit, and you want everything in balance, the oak, the tannin, the fruit. You want all of this to be in this balanced place. And it's taken me a lot of tasting and a lot of experimentation to feel completely confident and comfortable with what we're doing in terms of making these wines to express the property, making them for longevity, and also making the wines balanced enough where if somebody says, God, I'm not feeling so great this week, it's either a hangover or I might be on my way to the next life, that they can open a bottle of our wine and enjoy it as well. So hopefully that's a good explanation of tannin, but I don't know the assay, how they measure tannin at ETS, but we use that company as most of the great wineries in the Napa Valley do.
Perfect. I think we're ready for Howell Mountain Cab now, right?
We're ready for El Jefe. And now we come to Howell Mountain Cabernet. This is such a fantastic excuse for me on a Wednesday night to open up some great wine and enjoy it with you guys. I can't even tell you. All right, it's back to, I'm sharing is caring, so I'm going to go back to share screen. So back to Howell Mountain. And so our Howell Mountain Cabernet, this is our estate vineyard. It's a blend of these two vineyards. So predominantly what we call our winery estate vineyard, although Candlestick is estate as well, since we own it, and they're only 500 yards apart. But it's pretty funny. I took this this spring in I think late April, and the rest of the valley was full on in complete vegetation. You couldn't even see any trunk to the vine. And we had just gotten one little sprout on this day was showing up. So I find that hilarious. We're always so far behind in bud break, behind in harvest, behind in everything up there. Whoops, there's the 18 is a 94. We've given all of our neighbors 79-point scores, but I think it's because of the vintage we got dinged. It's a wonderful wine. And then you can see a 97 on the, the next year's vintage wine, but the 19 has nothing on the 18. It's a 3-point difference, but the 18 is such a great wine for us. But we could only harvest. I want to show you guys how remote. Here's the game camera from up there. This is what is captured at the Candlestick Vineyard. We got a bobcat, mountain lion, humongous bear. I mean, on the Affinity Vineyard, our primary pest pressure is from the mealybug, which you can fit about 50 of those on the head of a pin. And on Howell Mountain, if one of these guys gets inside the fence, as they used to before I took it from 2 volt to 6 volt, they can eat $50,000 worth of fruit in an hour and a half. So this guy didn't like it. He ended the life of that game camera. And after the fires, I'm really hoping that these guys make it back to the area. I now miss them. And if you ever get the chance, this wine from the stick that we call the stick, that is all Candlestick Bordeaux blend, another 97-pointer, I highly recommend it. So we'll come back and just say this Cabernet. So with Cuvée, you've gone up a vintage to 2019, and you've gone backward in price point. From Affinity to, I think, somewhere around $55, maybe $60 a bottle, around there. And now we're with our Howell Mountain Estate Cabernet, which I think this is one of the great red wines at any price in the Napa Valley every year. I mean, it does not matter if you have Colgan, Opus One, Harlan, whatever. This wine in the brown bag, we receive similar press to those wines, almost identical. It's one of Bob Craig's, it's a blessing and a curse that he was a lousy marketer of his own wines. And so our price point, these wines, you can get for $120 a bottle, as opposed to paying $350, $400 somewhere else. So I think Galoni and Parker both called us the last great attainable cult collectible in the Napa Valley. Oh man, that wine needs a whip and a chair still, but to tame it down. But now you're getting, for Mount Veeder, that loves Terranceau in the oak department, and this wine absolutely loves Darnajou. So I have to have Luc Morlaix of Morlaix Vineyards come up, because he represents Vincent Darnajou's fabulous barrels, which are handmade, and they only make about 25 barrels a day at that place. And they're very light on the wine. But, most famously, Chateau Cheval Blanc uses those barrels exclusively for their wines, and it's difficult to get, but Howell Mountain just loves those. So these wines for me are not an experiment where the fermentation's the same, the growing regime is the same, the yeast is the same, the barrels are the same, and then they say, see the vineyard. To me, each one of these wines needs its own fermentation regime or regimen. It needs its own, they all need their own barrel to accentuate what they do best. And so I'm a believer in, I think, Chris Carpenter of the Spire Collection, Kendall Jackson's wine, said the same thing, that he enjoys. I was like, finally, somebody that's going to get real with it. I think this wine and Darnajou barrels are the way to go. But if you think of Valley Floor, average of 5.5 tons an acre, a ton makes about 60 cases of wine. Up here on Howell Mountain, we've averaged 1.8 tons an acre for the last decade. And it's these incredibly small yields. There's nothing that gives you this intensity and this sense of place. And frankly, I just don't make this wine for everybody. I make what I think best represents these vineyards that I'm here in my life for just a short time. And, you know, it's my duty to honor Bob Craig's legacy and to honor these properties' legacy by making these wines. They're not everybody's cup of tea. You know, some people like them sweeter, fatter. That's not what this wine is. These are not Clydesdales. This is a thoroughbred. It's a pain in the ass to raise and manage, but ultimately absolutely beautiful. Any comments on the Howell Mountain?
Corville asked, is this 100% cab? I think you kind of commented on this before.
Oh,
but
there
you
we
can
go.
speak to it
Yeah,
again.
well, another great question. Like basically, except for the Chardonnay, none of our wines are 100% anything. So the Cabernet, what this really goes well, you know, with our Mount Veeder, we have some Cabernet Franc on the property that's really good. So we even make a Cabernet Franc. But in the mountains, you have these incredibly high tannin, high color Cabernet Sauvignons. And what you need for blending is something that's high color, low tannin. So Cabernet Franc tends to be a lousy blender in the mountains for the most part, because of the fact that it's slightly less color than Cabernet for the most part, and higher tannin. So they tend to add a green, stiff element to these Cabernets that need the opposite. But Petit Verdot and Malbec and Merlot are all tend to be very high color and slightly lower tannin than Cabernet, except in the instance of our Merlot in certain blocks that we make our estate Merlot from. And so that is what we blend with. So this wine is Cabernet Sauvignon. I think the 18 is around 85% or so. And then you have a little Merlot, a little Malbec, and a little Petit Verdot in that as well. And those wines they just help unlock that Cabernet. And if you try really hard and you have you have the wine notes in front of you, you can always amaze your guests at your dinner party by telling them, yes, this is 85% Cabernet Sauvignon and the rest Merlot and Petit Verdot. But this wine to me just has the layers. I mean, it's just absolutely very young right now, very smooth. When you roll it on your palate for a minute, though, those tannins will suck the moisture from your skull. Yes.
How much of the Cab Franc do you make, and how do we find it or get it or have it?
Well, you have to start by arriving in our tasting room in downtown Napa and giving me 5 minutes of shoulder massaging.
All right.
And then we'll take you to the back. We released, we only made 100 cases and we just released it. It's pretty amazing from Mount Veeder. So if you want some, you know, I'm the only Elton on our website. We don't send that out to the national market. Just shoot me an email and we'll take care of you WineStyles way. I think there'll be, at this point, we have like, we released it and it's gone, but there might be like a 3-bottle limit, but let me know and we can get you some Cab Franc. It's really good. But these properties, our Mount Veeder property, like the Howell Mountain, they're just such rare wines. And we're going to finish up now with a little bit of Zinfandel from our next door neighbor, because if you have the Zin, it's lighter than Cabernets. If you have it before the Cabs, it makes the Cabernet seem mute. But gosh, I mean, we have massage volunteers. I am loving this. Is fantastic. Jeff, can you get me on next week?
You keep sending us wine to pour, we'll definitely get you on every week. I'll tell you what, I mean, I don't have the wines in front of me. It's been some time since I've had most of them, but I'm sort of jealous of you sitting there, you know, drinking them. So,
well, you know, I have to make sure that they're safe for all of the guests around the country. But I mean, oh my gosh, you know, I'm constantly tasting the wines out of barrel. I'm constantly tasting the 2022s, the 2021s, the 2020s. So it's really great to go back to 2018 that we have in the national market right now and taste these wines are showing beautifully. We're going to finish, like in Talladega Nights, you know, if you don't like any of these, I think about what Ricky Bobby said to Cal Naughton Jr. when he said, well, maybe sometime, you could be shaken, I could be baked, I could win one. And he just says, just keep that feeling inside and swallow it, keep it deep down inside and never let it out. I don't want to, no comments if you don't like these wines. They're like my children, but we're going to move on to just a tiny production wine, Zinfandel. And the Zinfandel is one. I'm going to take you to the Black Sears. It's just, I absolutely loved Jerry Sears. He was just one of the great guys. His property is in between our winery and this super remote vineyard that's behind my head all night. And he was an aerospace engineer, built his own planes. He was a poet, one of the first vintners up on Howell Mountain, and just a tremendous human being. And he died the same week as Bob Craig did back in 2019. And it just crushed me. But his daughter, Ashley Sears Jambois, who's married to Christopher Jambois, they're terrific. And we're still able to buy this Black Sears Vineyard Zinfandel from them. And his wife's name was Joyce Black. Jerry was smart enough to put it on the label first. So I'm going to take you to the Zinfandel Vineyard. But this is such a rare wine. This is it. So if you go to the top left of the pictures, if you go over that hill, you run into Larry Turley's place right there in our place. But from this vineyard, you could hit a 7-iron and hit our vineyard if you hit it about 150 yards. You can see it's all head trained. It's farmed by the same guy that farms our place, Pete Richmond, the best farmer without doubt in almost all of the Napa Valley. So Pete farms, Hershey and Lotus for Dana up on Howell Mountain. Those wines are about $700 a bottle more expensive than what you have from us, but they're farmed by the same guy. And as Pete says, their property ain't better than your property, Elton. And I'm like, thank you very much. So you can see these vines look like they're a mess. They were planted in the early 70s. And I think now they're, 50 some years old, but just beautiful vines, dry farm, biodynamic, organic. You see no drip hose there. You can see from the top of the property, this is taken in wintertime. Very, very typical scene. This just doesn't happen anywhere else in the Napa Valley, except for Mount St. Helena. Again, not a volcano, a big volcanic rock, gets snow. But it's breathtaking. And to cut these vines this way, like there's Jerry. I love that man. I feel like Brian's song. I love Brian Piccolo. I love Jerry Sears. And then here's his son-in-law, Christopher, who's awesome. And Ashley, these guys are just tremendous people. When I did a webinar with Chris, I asked him to send me a photo of himself to advertise the webinar online. And this is what he sends me. I'm like, what is this, dude? You got to be kidding me. But Black Sears Vineyard, this requires so much skill and expertise in pruning. You see all those pass cuts. So this is not only caned, this is what's called head train, where they're just taking the heads of these vines to create a basket around the fruit. So each bunch of fruit can get this perfectly dappled light. The fruit loves filtered light. And now in California, with the heat being where it is, we're all working on ways to manage the canopy to give the fruit more shade. So the classical sort of VSP, vertical shoot position in farming, and you can tell from the way I'm speaking about this, that farming is basically 90% of producing the wine. I just mad respect for how much money and time they're spending with Pete Richmond to get this done, to produce these wines. So that's it for the Zinfandel. So this wine, I think, like the Chardonnay, if you really are not a big fan of American Zinfandel or California Zinfandel, this is the wine for you, because so many times I have sweet, ripe, super jammy wines that have tons of American oak on them. And this is anything but that. I mean, the reason it's in a, Burgundy bottle is this is almost more Rhone than it is American Zinfandel. And Larry Turley made this vineyard famous, and his sister Helen Turley made the wine in the first couple of years before Aaron Jordan took over, and now it's, oh my gosh, I'm blanking his first name, Pasalacqua, who's a great winemaker there for Turley. But that's
Keegan, my
yes,
man Keegan, Pasalacqua.
Keegan. That's right. Thank you, Laura. I mean, who's named Keegan anyway, right?
No, with a T. Tegan.
Oh, Tegan. See, that's weird. Elton, that's a very normal
Anywho,
name.
back to your fabulous Zen.
Careful, my brother's oldest is named Keegan.
Elton, this is Brian, Jeff's a younger and much better looking brother. My son's named Keegan, so just want to
No.
put that.
It's Tegan with the T as in tea time.
Okay, all right.
So
Hey,
Keegan, I can get behind, but Tegan, come on. That's like being named Elton.
hey, while I have you, the group wants to, or has a question about the fires. Were you affected by the fires?
Yes, I would take you back to the photos that I showed earlier, of I'll take you back there in case you missed. Where in the hell is that? See what happens? Oh, here we're getting there.
It was like the second one.
There we go.
There we go.
So this was in 2020, 2 weeks before the fires, and this was a week after the fires. Before, after. So the answer is unfortunately, my God, yes. Those fires were just absolutely devastating.
Did you lose any vineyards or vines?
We did, and I'll get us to where we were. There we go. We lost about 15%. I thought it was going to be 10%, but it's 15% of the vines. And people say, oh, it's only 15%, but for us, it represents about $930,000 a year in revenue for our little company. And then the fruit from those vines, the replantings are not going to be in the market. You have a year to get new budwood, and then you have, 6 years before, 6 years before you can release it into your estate line. We'll have more Howell Mountain Cuvée from it. And then 2 years in barrel and a year in bottle. And I'll be 65 years old and I'll say, we got these wines are out in the market from the new planting. So this business, I mean, it is the technical term is a major ball kicking when you have something like that happen. So, the fires for us have just been, whew, I just don't want to go through that again. It has been horrific. But the good news is, all these trees behind me, that's all gone now. There's nothing up there that can burn anymore. So, and now they've got the, they've been able to really work with drones to get an earlier response when we get these high winds and zero humidity, when anything will spark it. But I'd just like to give a shout out to Pacific Gas and Electric for all the people they've killed and all the property they've burned over the years. I'm still dealing with them and the electric and the insurance company over this whole thing. It's unbelievable. So yes, we were affected by the fires in a horrible way.
I know we're getting a little bit long here. One question I know hasn't been asked, but I'm certainly curious is for the folks that want to come out, and experience, tasting room experience. I know you got the multiple different options. Open, appointment only. What are the options for coming and seeing you and either seeing the vineyards as well? For those of us that want to geek out and actually be in the vineyard.
Well, when you guys are coming out, just, if you can give me a month of lead time, that's pretty much what it takes to get up to the winery property. And if you just say, hey, I was on the WineStyles, I was on the WineStyles tasting, it'll save you. We'll get 2 people in. It's $125 a head, but we'll take 2 of you for free. And then we'll charge your guests like half price. So it's tough to get up on the mountain. We have a beautiful place in downtown Napa that is in this historic home that's absolutely gorgeous. and it's a great tasting experience. So all you guys have to do, I'm the only Elton at Robert Craig Winery, and there's also easy access online. But if you come in and just say, hey, Elton said he would, I will comp all of your tastings in downtown Napa at $40 a person. And I know Laura will come over and bring something from the Old Bridge Cellars Library because their office is only 2 blocks away from us. But we'll take care of you guys if you come out, a month for the mountain, and because we're just booked out up there. But if you want to come see us, we'd love to see you. And then, of course, anybody named Keegan is half off from the start.
Perfect. I know there'll be a lot of us taking you up on it. I mean, people are getting back out and visiting and touring, which is super, super great. I've had the benefit of being at OBC's place as well, and had some of their wines. It's been ages ago since we've been there. So hopefully we can get back out that way as well. Well, I will say this. I mean, this has been a wonderful tasting experience. We appreciate you sharing the story, the history, your passion, for these wines, and most importantly, some amazing wines. It's not often that you get to have this level of tasting experience across all of our stores. And I know, speaking from all the store owners, we definitely appreciate the time that both you, Laura, Chris, who's not here, put in to make this happen. I know we have an amazing one coming up in November. It is October, right? Sometimes these months just blend together, with Goose Cross, which is another wonderful winery, Napa Valley Winery, out of Old Bridge Cellars portfolio as well. I'm looking at my schedule here. Does anybody know the date off the top of their head? I'll get it here.
You just posted November 9th.
November 9th. Perfect. Yes. Awesome. So November 9th. Again, it'll be a wonderful experience to learn about another Napa Valley winery with a great story as well. So any other questions? Let me see. No other questions here that I'm seeing. Again, thank you, everyone. Make sure that you reach out if there's additional things that you want or see. Make sure that you buy the wines that are in stock, and then we'll bug Laura for the things we can't have.
We'll take care of that from our end for sure. Thank you, everybody. That was so enjoyable.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.